Hey, Lions Nation! We're back with another exclusive video bringing you all the latest news about our beloved Detroit Lions. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss anything about the team now. Let's get into the news. No one in the NFL expected Detroit to pull off the impossible. Not the analysts, not the executives, not even the players who believed in Dan Campbell's vision more deeply than they believed in anything else, because signing MICAH Parsons wasn't just another offseason move. It wasn't a splash. It wasn't a surprise. It was a seismic event, an earthquake powerful enough to crack open the foundation of the entire league. For months, Detroit had been dismissed as one piece away. A franchise that had risen from ashes, but was still a step behind the giants of the NFC. Fans believed, coaches believed. But the outside world, they only believed in Detroit when it suited the narrative. They talked about grit, toughness, blue-collar identity. But when it came to elite talent, true generational game wreckers, they never imagined Detroit could land one. And yet, deep inside Ford Field, late at night behind locked doors and shuttered windows, a plan was forming. A plan whispered only between Campbell, Brad Holmes, and the tiny circle of trusted advisors who knew that if the Lions wanted to truly dominate the NFC, they needed more than heart. They needed a monster. They needed a nightmare. They needed someone whose mere presence on the field made quarterbacks tremble. And there was only one name that fit that description: MICAH Parsons. The first sign came in the form of a rumor that no one took seriously. An anonymous source on Twitter claimed Detroit had entered the MICAH race. Fans laughed. Journalists ignored it. Even the Cowboys treated it like noise. But inside Dallas, the situation was unraveling. Years of internal tension, contract disputes, philosophical disagreements, questions about how Parsons was being used in the scheme were beginning to burn through the walls. And Parsons himself, even as he dominated on Sundays, felt increasingly suffocated by a franchise that demanded everything from him but gave back only pressure, chaos, and a spotlight that became blinding rather than empowering. He still played like a demon unleashed, but behind closed doors, his patience was running thin. Eventually, conversations reached a breaking point, and when Jerry Jones refused to budge on a contract structure Parsons felt disrespected by, the relationship snapped with a violence the public wouldn't understand until much later. That was when Brad Holmes made the call. The meeting lasted 3 hours, 3 hours that would rewrite NFL history. Holmes laid out Detroit's vision, a defense built on controlled fury, anchored by players who wanted to suffocate offenses rather than dance around them, a scheme that wouldn't ask Parsons to choose between linebacker or edge, inside or outside, because Detroit didn't believe in limiting weapons. They believed in unleashing them. Campbell entered the meeting halfway through, wearing a hoodie, holding a cup of black coffee that had long gone cold, and when he sat across from Parsons, he didn't speak like a coach trying to recruit a star. He spoke like a soldier speaking to another soldier. He talked about war, about purpose, about identity, about Detroit's mission to stop being a nice underdog story and start becoming a machine of violence and precision that would make every offense in the NFC tremble before kickoff. And for the first time in months, maybe years, MICAH felt understood. Negotiations moved faster than even insiders could imagine. One moment, analysts on ESPN were discussing whether Dallas had enough money to extend both Parsons and their offensive stars. Hours later, Adam Schefter dropped the bomb. Sources: Detroit Lions finalizing terms with MICAH Parsons. Shockwaves erupted instantly. Cowboys fans spiraled into rage, panic, disbelief. Lions fans crashed social media with messages like, "This can't be real. Is this a dream?" And "the league is not ready." Even NFL players were stunned. Star pass rushers privately messaged each other asking if the news was legit. Quarterbacks across the league checked their schedules, suddenly realizing they would face a defensive front featuring Aidan Hutchinson and MICAH Parsons, a combination that sounded illegal, inside Detroit's facility. The energy was indescribable. Staffers who had worked through the endless losing seasons broke into tears. Veterans felt adrenaline buzzing through their veins. Young players whispered to each other like kids on Christmas morning, unable to process that one of the most terrifying defensive players of the modern era had chosen them. When MICAH finally walked through the doors wearing Honolulu blue for the first time, cameras flashed, staff members froze mid-step, and even hardened assistants who prided themselves on their discipline felt their hearts slam against their ribs. Parsons didn't smile, didn't wave, he simply nodded. Like a man entering a battlefield he had waited his entire life to claim. Then came the first closed practice. No media, no outsiders, just the team, just the family. And what happened inside those walls became legend almost instantly. Parsons' first rep wasn't against a rookie, it wasn't against the backup. Dan Campbell made sure of that. It was against the starting left tackle, one of the best in the league, and on that rep, Parsons didn't just win, he exploded. He moved with a speed that defied physics, bending around the edge, dipping his shoulder so low it looked impossible to maintain balance, and closing in on the quarterback with a burst that made several players gasp. The entire field froze. Even Hutchinson stared in awe. It wasn't jealousy. It wasn't competition. It was realization. Realization that Detroit's defense had just transformed from very good to horrifying. Word spread. Coaches from other teams sent texts asking if the practice rumors were exaggerated. They weren't in the days that followed. Parsons terrorized the offense in ways the team had never experienced. Quarterbacks rushed their reads. Running backs hesitated at the line. Tight ends walked off the field shaking their heads like they'd just seen a ghost. Campbell watched it all with the expression of a man who knew exactly what he had built. And for the first time, Detroit's defensive identity wasn't about grit alone. It was about domination, controlled, ruthless, unapologetic domination. Before we move on, take a second to drop a like and subscribe. That way, you'll stay up to date with every exclusive Lions update. And you'll even have a chance to win an official Detroit Lions jersey. Let's keep going. The impact of Parsons' rival was felt across the entire city of Detroit. Overnight, murals appeared downtown featuring Parsons and Hutchinson standing shoulder to shoulder like twin titans guarding the skyline. Local shops began selling shirts that read "The Hunt Begins." Season ticket demand surged to levels the franchise had never seen, and Ford Field, it became something else entirely, something primal, something alive. Fans who had endured decades of mediocrity suddenly felt the ground shifting. Beneath them felt destiny cracking open. Reporters couldn't keep up. Talk shows across the country debated where Detroit now ranked in the NFC. But no matter how they tried to break it down with stats and diagrams and cautious optimism, there was one truth they couldn't escape. The Lions had built a defense quarterbacks would fear with their whole soul, but behind the hype, behind the growing national attention, something deeper was happening inside Parsons himself. In Dallas, he had been a star. In Detroit, he was becoming a weapon, a force, a purpose. Campbell's system unleashed him fully. Instead of forcing him into a box edge rusher one play, linebacker the next, Detroit let him roam, let him stalk, let him hunt. Coaches built packages that allowed him to line up anywhere, over the gap, off the edge, in a two-point stance over a tight end, even dropping into coverage just long enough to ruin a quarterback's rhythm before detonating the pocket on the next snap. And Hutchinson, far from being overshadowed, flourished beside him. Offenses could no longer double-team both. They had to choose, and choosing wrong had consequences. Inside the locker room, Parsons became a gravitational force, not loud, not arrogant, focused, intensely focused. He taught rookies how to watch film with the eyes of a predator, not a student. He showed linebackers how to read a quarterback's feet to predict audibles. He explained to young edge rushers why hesitation was death, why the first step mattered more than strength, why violence had to be controlled but never muted. And Detroit listened, because they knew he wasn't speaking from ego. He was speaking from experience scarred into him by battles fought in Dallas, battles he didn't want to repeat. Then came the first preseason game. Ford Field was a furnace of noise, visible electricity pulsing through the stands. When Parsons jogged onto the field for the first defensive series, the stadium erupted with a roar so loud it rattled the metal seams of the roof. And the crazy part, he didn't even play more than a handful of snaps. He didn't need to. On his first snap, he lined up wide, staring down the opposing tackle like a lion staring at prey. The ball snapped, and Parsons unleashed hell. He torched the edge, bent around the tackle with inhuman agility, and forced the quarterback to throw the ball away in panic. The crowd exploded. 3 plays later, he came from the opposite side, splitting a double team and landing a hit that echoed across the turf. Detroit's sideline erupted into chaos, helmets slamming, players screaming, coaches grinning like madmen. And Campbell, he didn't celebrate. He simply nodded, arms folded. A general watching his army's strongest weapon ignite. But the moment that truly defined Parsons' arrival came after the game. Long after cameras were shut off and fans had gone home, a rookie defensive back, nervous, unsure, still adjusting to the speed of the league, walked up to Parsons and apologized for blowing a coverage earlier in the game. Parsons placed a hand on the kid's shoulder, looked him in the eyes, and said, "Don't apologize. Learn. Detroit doesn't fear mistakes. We grow from them. Tomorrow we fix it. Together." That was the exact moment the locker room understood. Parsons wasn't here to be a superstar. He was here to build something. As the regular season approached, national analysts began to fear what Detroit had assembled. The defensive line, once seen as promising, now looked like something engineered in a lab. Training camp film, what little leaked, showed plays that didn't look real. Parsons blowing up screens before the running back even turned. Hutchinson collapsing pockets with raw force, the two meeting at the quarterback so often that teammates joked they should put in a request to share sacks. Opposing offensive coordinators adjusted their entire game plans weeks in advance, just to avoid the chaos these two unleashed. And when week 1 finally arrived, everything changed. Detroit didn't just win, they destroyed. Parsons recorded the sacks, forced a fumble, and blew up a third down play that shifted the entire momentum of the game. Hutchinson added a sack and a half. The defense swarmed like a storm with a mind of its own, and the broadcast booth, usually composed, could barely contain themselves. This is something different," one commentator whispered as replays rolled on screen. "Detroit isn't just good, they're terrifying across the league." Head coaches stayed up late into the night, rewatching Detroit's defensive film in disbelief, because it wasn't just talent. It was orchestration, controlled destruction. The kind of defense that didn't just stop you, it broke you. By midseason, Detroit led the league in sacks, pressures, turnovers, and defensive efficiency, and it wasn't because Parsons took over, it was because he elevated everyone around him. The Lions became predators, fast, angry, smart, relentless, and through all the chaos, all the dominance, Parsons carried himself with a calm intensity, a quiet fury, a sense of belonging he hadn't felt anywhere else. Detroit wasn't just his team, it was his home, and as the season marched on, one truth became impossible to ignore. By leaving Dallas, MICAH Parsons hadn't just changed his own career, he had changed the entire NFL. Because Detroit wasn't an underdog anymore. Detroit was the nightmare quarterbacks feared when they closed their eyes at night. Detroit was the storm coming over the horizon. Detroit was the new standard of defensive violence. And it all began the moment MICAH Parsons put on that Honolulu blue and said the words that became legend inside the locker room: "Let's hunt." We bring you the latest Lions news every single day, so make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. And of course, drop a comment below with your thoughts on today's news. Your voice makes a difference for Lions Nation. See you in the next video.